They said it was just a gas station job. Remote, quiet, perfect for someone looking to disappear. I needed the money, and I needed distance from my past. Copper Center, Alaska sounded like a place where nothing ever happened. But Midnight Express, gas isn't just another roadside stop. It's a threshold between here and something else, something watching, something waiting. I survived one night there by following a list of rules that seemed insane, until they were the only thing keeping me alive. If you're thinking about taking the job, let me tell you this. Some rules aren't meant to be broken, ever. The Subaru's engine wheezed like a dying animal as I crept into Copper Center, Alaska, a place so remote it didn't feel real. The October wind slashed through the cracked weather seal on the windshield, carrying the bite of early winter. My breath fogged the glass as I squinted through the growing dusk at the speck of a town that clung to the Richardson Highway like a barnacle. A diner, a few cabins, 2 gas stations facing off like old rivals. That was it. And for a man like me, down to his last few $100, it might as well have been salvation. I was 29 and broke in every way a man could be. The crumpled envelope in the glove compartment held $800 in cash. Everything I had left after 2 years of feeding Reno's slot machines and lying to everyone I ever loved. My house was gone, sold in a fire sale to pay off debts I barely remembered racking up. My car had been repossessed 6 months ago, and the Subaru I was currently driving wasn't even mine. It belonged to a cousin who'd stopped returning my calls the minute I crossed into Alaska. Even the engagement ring I'd once offered to Sarah, the woman I thought would save me, had been pawned 3 months ago in a final, desperate bet that didn't pay off. The road behind me stretched like a scar through the snow-draped spruce, trees and jagged mountains. I'd driven 18 hours straight from Fairbanks, hopped up on gas station coffee, and the delusion that maybe, just maybe, changing geography could fix the rot in my life. It was a gambler's logic. New place, new odds. But even as I rolled into Copper Center, I knew that was a lie. You can outrun cities, maybe even people, but not the version of yourself that keeps pace in the rearview mirror. The town looked like it had been built as an afterthought. A yellow glow spilled from a fogged-up diner window, promising warmth I hadn't felt in weeks. Beyond that, a few cabins dotted the tree line, their thin chimney smoke rising like wisps of ghosts. But what caught my eye were the 2 gas stations. One was new, Chevron, slick with LED lights and brimming with diesel-chugging 18-wheelers. Drivers moved around it like ants, shouting, laughing, safe. The other station sat across the road like something left behind by time. Midnight Express. Its neon sign flickered unevenly, each letter struggling to stay lit, as if resisting the dark. 2 rusting pumps stood out front, and the building looked more like a mausoleum than a place of business. My stomach growled loud enough to make me wince. I hadn't eaten since Fairbanks, and the smell of bacon grease from the diner was enough to drag me back to life. I parked the Subaru and killed the engine. It coughed once, then fell silent with a finality that felt like judgment. I knew I should keep driving. Anchorage was still hours away. But I didn't have enough gas to get there, and even if I did, what would I find? More people to disappoint? More bridges to burn? No. I needed work, food, a place to stop disappearing and just exist for a while. I pulled my jacket tight and stepped into the wind. The cold bit through every layer I had, straight into the bone. This wasn't the kind of cold you acclimate to. This was the kind that watches, the kind that waits to see what you're made of. Inside the diner, the heat hit me like a punch. At a bice, bell over the door chimed, and half a dozen heads turned to look me over. Stranger, outsider, probably trouble. I ignored them and slid into a cracked vinyl booth near the window. A waitress with silver hair and a scar that twisted the side of her mouth poured me a cup of black coffee before I could even ask. "Passing through?" she asked, not quite warmly. "Looking for work?" I said, my voice hoarse from hours of silence. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded toward the window, toward that flickering old gas station across the road. "There's a place hiring," she said, "but you'd better hope you're the type who follows instructions." I didn't know what that meant, not then, but something in the way her eyes lingered on mine, the way her hand shook just a little as she refilled my cup, it made me pause. Maybe I should have taken that moment seriously. Maybe I should have gotten back in the car and driven until I ran out of road. But I didn't, because when your whole life has fallen apart, even a haunted gas station in the middle of nowhere can start to look like home. The coffee was bitter and burned my tongue, but I welcomed the pain. It reminded me I was still here, still in one piece. The diner smelled like scorched bacon, damp wool, and something metallic beneath it all, like old coins in a dusty drawer. A few locals sat scattered in red vinyl booths, their voices quieting. As soon as I entered, only to pick back up in murmurs once it was clear I wasn't anyone they recognized. My presence wasn't threatening, just unfortunate. People like me carried the kind of bad luck that stuck to your boots. The waitress leaned on the counter with the casual weariness of someone who'd seen too much. Her gray hair was pulled back, in a tight bun, but strands had escaped and clung to her face. The scar that ran from her ear to the corner of her mouth gave her a permanent half-smile that wasn't warm. It was more like a warning. "You say you're looking for work?" she asked, wiping her hands on a dish towel that had long since given up trying to be clean. "Yeah," I said. "Anything really. I can drive, clean, stock shelves. I don't need much." She studied me for a long time, and I could tell she was weighing more than just my words. Maybe she saw the bags under my eyes, the dirt under my fingernails, or the way I held the coffee cup with two hands like I was afraid someone would take it away. Maybe she'd seen men like me before, broken, drifting, desperate. "There's always the logging camp," she said eventually, "but they're seasonal and they just laid off a dozen guys. The Chevron might need a stock boy if you don't. Mind corporate hours and corporate pay." I followed her gaze out the window to the LED-lit haven across the road. Clean, bright, predictable. "And Midnight Express?" I asked, my eyes drifting to the flickering sign in the shadows. The scar on her cheek twitched ever so slightly. It wasn't a smile, it was something else, a reflex, maybe a memory. "That place," she began, then stopped. She refilled my coffee. "They're always looking. Can't seem to keep anyone on night shift. Not for long, anyway." "Why not?" "It's just not right, especially after dark." I waited, but she didn't elaborate. Just stared at the station like it had personally offended her, or hurt her. Her knuckles tightened around the coffee pot. "It's work," I said, trying to keep my tone casual. "What's the pay?" 18 an hour. That was more than I'd made in months. I nearly choked on my coffee. She didn't look impressed by my excitement. If anything, she seemed a little sad. "There's a flyer on the bulletin board by the door. Been there a while. You sure you want to call?" I glanced over. The board was cluttered with church bake sale announcements, lost dog flyers and notes about furniture for sale. But tucked into the corner, faded and curled, was a simple sheet of paper. "Night shift attendant needed. Midnight Express gas, 18 hour. Must be reliable. Must follow instructions. Customers may be normal or strange." That last line made me pause. Strange customers, not difficult, not unusual. Strange. It felt intentional. Like a test. I copied the number down anyway. Back at the counter, the waitress poured me another cup without asking. Her expression was unreadable. "You really calling them?" "I really need the job," I said. She sighed like someone who knew how that story usually ended. "Your funeral, kid." The phone rang 3 times before a man's voice answered, rough like gravel in a tin can. "Carl speaking. I'm calling about the night shift position at Midnight Express." A pause. "You available to start tonight?" That was fast. Too fast. "Yes, sir. Meet me at the station at 9. Bring ID. Be ready to work." The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, my heart beating harder than it should have. Something about the way he'd spoken, terse, direct, urgent, made me uneasy. But the money was good. The job was real. And I didn't have time for second thoughts. The waitress didn't say anything when I returned to my booth. She just looked at me like she'd seen this exact moment before, 100 times, and knew how it ended. She topped off my coffee and walked away. At 8:30 I left the diner and stepped back into the cold, the wind cutting sharper now. The flickering sign across the road blinked at me like a dying eye. Midnight Express. A fitting name. I started the Subaru and drove across the street. 9 p.m. was waiting. At precisely 9 p.m., my tires crunched over the gravel lot of Midnight Express gas, and the building revealed its secrets under the harsh glare of my headlights. What had looked old and abandoned from across the street now looked worse, wounded, like it had survived something violent and never truly healed. The white paint on the siding wasn't just peeling, it was blistered in patches like skin after a burn. The windows were coated with layers of grime so thick they reflected no light, only distorted shadows, and standing beneath the flickering neon sign was a man who looked like he'd been carved from leather and military-grade suspicion. He wore a flannel shirt tucked crisply into faded jeans and boots, so well worn they might have walked every inch of Alaska. His face was sharp, weather-beaten, and hard to read, but his eyes, grey and calculating, took me in with a single glance. He didn't offer a smile. "Jake Morrison?" I stepped out and nodded, extending my hand. "Yes, sir. No relation to you, I assume?" "Carl," he said, gripping my hand in a shake that nearly cracked my knuckles. His voice was firm, with a raspy edge, like a man who'd smoked too much or screamed into the void too often. "You follow instructions, Jake?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Let's get this over with." He didn't wait for me to follow, just turned, unlocked the front door with an oversized key, and disappeared into the shadows of the station. I trailed behind, feeling the temperature drop the moment we crossed the threshold. Inside, the station smelled like dust, stale coffee, and something faintly sweet, like rotten fruit trying to hide under a fresh coat of sugar. A single buzzing, fluorescent tube flickered overhead, casting a sickly blue glow across the cracked linoleum floor. The front counter looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. A cash register that belonged in a museum sat crooked on the counter. Behind it, shelves lined the walls, stocked with gas station fare, candy bars, beef jerky, batteries, energy drinks. The cooler hummed softly from the back, and next to it was a locked door marked "Employees Only." Carl led me behind the counter and into a small, cramped office. The room was barren save for a metal desk, a beat-up chair, an old rotary phone, and a large steel door built into the wall like a panic room or a vault. That door made the hairs on my arms stand up. "This is where you'll spend most of your shift when you're not cleaning or dealing with customers," Carl said, settling into the chair. It creaked beneath his weight. He pulled a manila envelope from the drawer and began counting out 20s. "200 advance. Your pay for the first week will be settled on Friday, assuming you last that long." I took the cash without hesitation. It felt heavier than it should have, like a bribe instead of a paycheck. He stared at me for a long moment, then opened another drawer and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was yellowed at the edges and laminated like it had seen too many, coffee spills and too few revisions. "Here's where things get serious," he said. "There are 7 rules. Break any of them and you're done. And I don't mean fired, I mean you're finished. You'll disappear or worse. Got it?" I blinked. "Disappear? Just listen." He unfolded the page, his voice as calm as a man reading instructions for defusing a bomb. Keep all exterior lights on at all times. Replace burned-out bulbs immediately. Simple enough, a matter of visibility. But he stared at me as if this one was life or death. If you hear someone calling your name from outside between 2 and 3 a.m., ignore it. It is not a person. The way he said not a person gave me chills. If a child enters alone, do not acknowledge them. Continue working, and they will leave. My stomach turned. Never answer the store phone between 3:17 and 3:23 a.m., no matter how many times it rings. The exact minutes felt oddly specific, which somehow made them even more terrifying. If someone asks for directions to the old mining camp, tell them it burned down in 1987. A lie, apparently. But Carl didn't flinch when he said it. If a car pulls up with no one inside and the air gets hot, lock yourself in the office until the car leaves. He gestured toward the steel door behind him. Only call me during emergencies, and I mean emergencies, not because you got spooked. He set the paper down in front of me. Memorize them, live by them. I stared at the list, trying to absorb the words through the thick haze of disbelief clouding my brain. Is this a joke? Carl's eyes hardened. Does this look like a joke to you? No, it didn't. The rules hung in the air like smoke. I looked at the office again. The reinforced door, the flickering lights, the cold hum of the cooler bleeding in from the other room, and realized that whatever this place was, normal didn't apply here. You're not the first to take this job, Carl said, but if you want to be the last, you better listen. These rules have kept me alive for 20 years. Break one, just one, and you might not even make it till morning. I nodded slowly, too stunned to speak. Good, he said, rising from his chair. Come on, I'll show you the rest. He walked me through the rest of the station, the register system, the cleaning supplies, the pump activators. Standard stuff, but everything felt off. Like a movie set built to look like a gas station, but nothing was quite right. The shadows seemed too long, the humming of the lights too rhythmic. Even the cooler's compressor whined like it was trying to form words. Back at the register, Carl showed me a large leather-bound book resting beside the till. That's the logbook. Write down everything. Every sale, every odd thing, every sound that doesn't belong. You'll thank me later. I flipped through a few pages. Among the scribbles about candy bar stock and fuel sales were unsettling notes. Child entered, didn't speak. Ignored as per Rule 3, left after 5 minutes. Or phone rang during blackout. 3:20 a.m. Didn't answer. Carl tapped the cover and looked me square in the eye. This place remembers, and so should you. With that, he grabbed his keys and headed for the door. I'll be back tomorrow night. Just follow the rules, Jake. That's all you have to do. The door shut behind him with a chime that echoed through the stillness, and just like that, I was alone. The first hour of my shift passed slowly but not silently. Midnight Express gas had a kind of hum to it, a layered background noise of old wiring, humming coolers, and creaking shelves that never seemed to rest. Even when nothing moved, the place sounded alive, like the building itself was breathing through dry vents and flickering light tubes. I spent the first 10 minutes just reading the rules again, each one etched into my mind with growing dread. I didn't know whether they were a prank or the ramblings of a paranoid old man, but Carl didn't strike me as someone who joked easily. At 10:17 p.m., the bell above the door chimed, sharp and sudden, and I jolted upright from behind the counter. A trucker stepped in, tall, thick arms, flannel jacket, and a kind of tired that settled in the bones. He glanced around the store like someone scanning for escape routes, then approached the coffee station without saying a word. I stayed behind, the counter watching him with guarded curiosity. Something about him felt aware, like he wasn't just tired, he was cautious, He grabbed a cup of burnt coffee, paid in crumpled bills, and finally looked at me. "You knew?" "First night," I said, trying to sound casual. He nodded, eyes scanning the walls, the lights, the window. "Carl give you the talk? The one about the rules?" I asked. That made him freeze. "Follow them," he said quietly. "Don't get curious. Don't get clever. This place—" He hesitated, glancing toward the door. "This place is older than you think, and meaner than it looks." Before I could ask what that meant, he took his coffee and left. I watched his rig's tail lights disappear into the cold Alaskan night. His words lingered longer than he did. I busied myself with cleaning and inventory, trying to shake the tension out of my shoulders. Wiping down the coffee station, restocking the snack shelves, counting candy bars, anything to keep moving. But no matter where I stood, I felt the station's layout pressing in, like the building was intentionally compact, deliberately claustrophobic. There were too many reflective surfaces, too many blind spots. At 10:40 p.m., a second customer pulled into the lot. I saw the headlights sweep past the dusty front windows, followed by the rattle of a compact car engine that didn't sound like it enjoyed the cold. The bell rang as a woman stepped inside, mid-30s maybe, with a tight ponytail and a winter coat zipped all the way to her chin. She looked over her shoulder twice before approaching the counter. Her hands trembled as she counted out 20s. "Just gas," she muttered. "Pump one." I punched it in. "You okay?" "This place gives me the creeps," she said, eyes darting toward the darker corners of the station. "I was driving up from Valdez and needed fuel, but I don't know. I almost kept going." "You're not the only one," I said. She looked at me properly for the first time, scanning my face as if searching for something. "It's not just the building," she whispered. "It's the dark around it. Like something's waiting out there, just past the lights. Like it's hunting." I didn't have a reply to that, and I didn't like how closely her description matched the crawling sensation that had been threading through me since Carl left. She took her receipt and practically ran back to her car. The engine started before her door even closed. She didn't look back. After she left, the silence returned heavier, like it had been waiting for permission. I stood behind the counter, staring at the pumps. The lights buzzed. The cooler hummed. The shadows outside thickened. A gust of wind rattled the building like a hand dragging across rusted siding. I moved without thinking, stepping away from the counter and checking the light switches. Rule 1. Keep all exterior lights on. I scanned each bulb through the windows, still glowing, still alive. Then something on the floor caught my eye. Tucked near the base of the register was a folded piece of construction paper, the kind kids use in school art projects. I bent down and picked it up. Crayon marks covered the inside, bright, thick, scribbled with the confident hand of a child. The image was unmistakable. Midnight Express, drawn in surprising detail. The flickering neon sign, the 2 gas pumps, out front, even the scratchy siding on the walls. And just outside the pool of light stood a figure, a shadow, long-armed and faceless. Beneath the drawing, in shaky, uneven letters, someone had written, "Friend." I stared at the word. Something about it chilled me more than any threat could have. It wasn't just eerie. It felt personal, intimate. A warning whispered through the voice of innocence. I turned the paper over. No name, no date, just that waxy smell of fresh crayon, as if it had been drawn tonight. I shoved it into the drawer next to the logbook and slammed it shut. By 11 p.m., I'd restocked the snacks, triple-checked the lights, and written down every odd detail in the log. 10:17, trucker warned me about rules. 10:40, nervous woman mentioned feeling hunted. 10:55, child's drawing found beneath register. figure in shadows labeled friend. I closed the book, but I couldn't close the feeling growing in my chest that I was being watched by something that didn't blink, and worse, that I'd already been noticed. The minutes after 11 p.m. dragged like dead weight. I kept moving to stay ahead of the stillness, stocking shelves that didn't need stocking, checking inventory that hadn't changed, wiping down already clean counters. I told myself it was just a job, just a building, just an old station in a remote town. But it wasn't. The silence here wasn't empty. It was waiting. The hum of the cooler, the buzz of the fluorescent lights. They didn't soothe me. They synced up like a rhythm, pulsing against the back of my skull like something unseen was timing its breath with the station. I found myself checking the rules over and over again, as if expecting them to change when I wasn't looking. Rule 4 stood out more than the others now. Never answer the phone between 3:17 and 3:23 a.m., no matter how many times it rings. I glanced at the wall clock. To 11:26 p.m., safe for now. That's when the phone rang. It wasn't jarring at first, just the old rotary model on the back desk, its ring high-pitched and out of place in the age of cell phones. But the sound sliced through the station like a blade, and my body stiffened before my mind caught up. I walked slowly to the office, watching the numbers on the wall clock. Still well before the danger window, safe to answer. I picked up the receiver. Midnight Express gas. No voice. Just static. Low, crackling, then a sudden burst of something that sounded like breathing. Heavy, wet, like someone gasping through, a flooded lung. It wasn't mechanical or distorted, it was too human, and that somehow made it worse. "Hello," I said again, already regretting it. The breathing intensified for a few seconds, then cut out abruptly. The line went dead with a click. I stood there holding the receiver for a moment longer than I should have, my mind scrambling for an explanation. A prank, bad signal. But there had been weight in that breath. Effort, fear, maybe, or hunger. Logged it anyway, flipping open the leather-bound book beside the register. 11:28 p.m. Received phone call, no voice, only heavy breathing. Line disconnected. I started to close the book, but paused. Something urged me to flip back through the pages. Maybe I wanted reassurance that weird calls were rare. Maybe I wanted proof that this had happened before. Anything to make it feel less targeted. The entries stretched back decades. Some were mundane. Sales, fuel shortages, broken vending machines. But interspersed between the normal were fragments of unease. I scanned through entry after entry, the language slowly shifting from professional to personal, then fearful. June 2019, 12:15 a.m. Phone call. No voice, just wet breathing. Didn't answer second ring. Dave. April 2021, 11:47 p.m. Strange call, breathing only. Sounded wrong. Janet. October 2022, midnight. Call came in. Thought it was my own voice whispering. Didn't answer second time. Bill. They matched mine too closely to ignore. Different employees, different years. Same phenomenon, same dread. I kept flipping past drawings, frost messages, repeated visits from the same entities. Each log entry felt less like documentation and more like a warning to whoever came next. A paper trail of horror that no one had ever followed all the way through, until now. The most recent entries were from a man named Marcus, October 12th, quiet night. Followed rules, all lights operational. October 13th, child entered, didn't respond. Very cold. Cooler fogged up again. Message read, so alone. Logged and locked doors. And then from October 14th, just a day before I arrived. October 14th, phone call at 12:03 a.m. Same breathing. Didn't answer again. Found another drawing. Same figure in the dark, same word. Friend. Getting worse. Logbook might be the only thing keeping me sane. No signature. No confirmation if Marcus finished his shift. No handover. Just silence. Closed the log, the pages fluttering like they didn't want to rest. My hands were trembling more than I liked to admit. At 11:45, I stepped outside to check the lights. Rule 1. Keep all exterior lights on. Replace any that go out immediately. The cold slapped me like a punishment for being unprepared. The sky was ink black, no stars, no moon, just void. The gas pumps stood still in the frozen air, and the surrounding forest seemed to lean in closer than before. The lights above the pumps were still burning, buzzing quietly, but I knew it wouldn't last. They were testing me, just like everything else. Back inside, the warmth of the station felt artificial, like a set designed to resemble comfort. I stood behind the counter staring at the phone. Why the breathing? Why always the same? Because it was a hook, a lure. The first test. The rules didn't warn against answering every call, just during that cursed 6-minute window. Maybe because the thing on the line needed an invitation. Maybe because it needed your attention first. My stomach turned. I made another log entry. Then 55 p.m. Exterior lights checked, all operational, no activity outside. Logbook entries from prior staff confirm similar calls. Pattern matches. Same breathing, same silence. Possible intelligent entity attempting contact. I underlined that last part without knowing why. It felt true. At exactly midnight, the phone rang again. I didn't move. I just stared at it as it rang. Once, twice, and 3 times. Then silence, and just like that, the hour ended. But the real night had only begun. The clock above the register ticked past 2 a.m., each second dropping like a stone into water, rippling through the silence that had once again settled over the station. Midnight Express didn't just go quiet. It held its breath. The hum of the cooler and the buzz of the overhead lights was still there, but thinner now, like the station itself was bracing for something it knew was coming. I felt it too. A pressure in the air, an instinct older than logic whispering from somewhere deep in the lizard part of my brain. Don't open the door. I double-checked the rules. Rule 2. If you hear someone calling your name from outside between 2 and 3 a.m., ignore it. It is not a person, not a person. At exactly 2:04 a.m. it began. Jake. It was soft, almost drowned in the wind. I was behind the counter, restocking energy shots, when I heard it, just loud enough to freeze my hands mid-reach. I stood up straight. My heart thudded against my ribs. I waited, hoping I'd imagined it. Jake, please. The voice was closer now, still outside, but clearer. I turned toward the front of the store, but didn't approach. The windows showed nothing but darkness, a perfect wall of black beyond the perimeter lights. But I knew that voice. It was Sarah's. Everything in my body pulled tight. My breath caught. I hadn't heard her voice in nearly a year, not since the night she walked out and left me with nothing but a suitcase, a pile of unpaid debts, and the bitter aftertaste of too many broken promises. But there it was, her voice. The same tremble she'd had when she cried, the same California softness wrapped around hard truth. Jake, I'm cold. I came all this way. Don't make me stay out here. My throat went dry. My legs moved instinctively toward the door, stopping just a foot short of the threshold. I stared at the handle, my fingers twitched. Please, she begged, and God help me, it sounded so real, so human. I could almost picture her on the other side of the glass, cheeks red from the cold, tears in her eyes, the same way she looked when she begged me to stop gambling, to stop chasing losses that never paid out. But Sarah wasn't here. Sarah was hundreds of miles away in Reno, probably asleep beside someone who didn't pawn engagement rings to feed a slot machine. This wasn't her. I knew that. My mind knew that. But my heart didn't. Jake, I forgive you. The voice cracked on that word. Forgive. And it hit me like a knife under the ribs. I hadn't cried in months, hadn't let myself feel anything real in longer than that. But hearing her say it, even if it wasn't really her, threatened to unravel me. I pressed my hands flat on the counter and stared down at the rule sheet. Carl's words came back like a hammer to the skull. It's not a person. The voice changed. Jake. It's Amy. My knees buckled slightly. Amy was my younger sister. She hadn't spoken to me in over 2 years, not since I lied about borrowing money for rent and used it to cover a poker debt instead. She sounded tired, worn out. I miss you, she said. I think about you all the time. I gritted my teeth. My nails dug into the counter. I hadn't thought about Amy in weeks, hadn't let myself dwell on how much I missed her, how much I hated what I'd become in her eyes. This was deliberate. It knew who to mimic, what to say. It had studied me. Then came the final voice. Jake. Open the door. My father. I hadn't heard his voice since the day he died, sitting in a VA hospital bed with half a lung and full of regret. His voice was low, gruff, with the subtle weight of disappointment he always carried when talking to me. You threw it all away, he said now. Everything I worked for. You had a future, son, and you ruined it. Tears welled up in my eyes before I could stop them, not because the words hurt, but because I'd said them to myself 100 times in the mirror. Hearing them from my father's voice broke something loose inside me, but I didn't move. I stayed rooted to the floor, my knuckles white as I gripped. The edge of the counter like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. I'm sorry, I whispered, not to the voices outside, but to the people they weren't. The voices continued, rotating through Sarah, Amy, my father, sometimes pleading, sometimes mocking, always hitting deeper than the last. Each one knew exactly where to press, what memories to scrape raw. And each one sounded perfect. Not just similar, exact. Right down to Sarah's tiny laugh, Amy's exasperated sigh, my father's cough before he spoke. At 2:28 a.m., the voices stopped, all at once. Gone. The silence that followed was louder than the screams. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't exhale until a full minute had passed. I wrote everything down in the logbook, my hands trembling so hard the letters came out shaky and slanted. 04:28 a.m. Voices outside. Mimicked people I know. Sarah, Amy, Dad. All emotionally manipulative. Did not engage. Followed Rule 2. Voices stopped at 2:28. And beneath that, in all caps, not a person. I underlined it twice. I had 30 minutes until 3 a.m., and I was starting to believe that Carl hadn't told me everything. The silence that followed the voices was worse than the voices themselves. It settled over the station like a weighted blanket, smothering every sound, even the buzzing of the overhead lights. The air felt wrong, too still, too thick, like the moment before an earthquake or the eye of a storm. I kept my eyes on the logbook for a long time after writing down the last entry, unwilling to move, unwilling to tempt whatever might still be watching from outside. At 2:31 a.m., the bell above the front door chimed. My heart seized. I didn't look up. Rule 3. If a child enters alone, do not acknowledge them. Continue working and they will leave. I felt the air drop several degrees, sharp and immediate, as if someone had opened the freezer doors to the night. My breath began to fog. Goosebumps spread up my arms, despite the heating system rattling steadily. From the back room, footsteps didn't sound. There were no sounds at all, but I could feel her. It's hard to explain how you feel someone without seeing or hearing them. But there was a shift in pressure, a presence, light and cold, like dry snow falling in a dream. I forced myself to keep my gaze on the inventory sheet in front of me. My hands began moving, mechanically, scanning for counts of oil filters, energy drinks, lighter fluid. Anything to fill the growing void between my thoughts and my fear. In my peripheral vision, I caught the shape of her, a small figure standing just inside the doorway, outlined in flickering fluorescent light. She looked no older than 8. Her pink parka was faded, the fur-lined hood matted and stained like it had been buried under snow for years. Her dark hair hung in limp, uneven strands around a pale face that was too still, too perfect. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She just was. And then, slowly, she began to glide forward. Not walk, glide. Her feet made no sound against the linoleum. The air thickened with cold as she passed the aisles, heading directly for the beverage cooler near the back wall. I kept my eyes low, but in the reflection of the cooler glass, I could see her clearly. She stopped in front of it, standing with her arms at her sides, but something was wrong with the reflection. While the girl stood still, her reflection moved. It pressed its tiny hands against the inside of the cooler door, as if trying to push through the glass. It turned its head slowly, deliberately, until it was staring directly at me through the mirrored surface. Its mouth opened into a wide, silent scream. I bit the inside of my cheek hard enough to draw blood. Pain kept me present. Pain kept me from breaking the rule. Frost began to form on the inside of the cooler's glass. Fast and deliberate. It wasn't natural. It wasn't condensation or temperature fluctuations. It was intentional. Letters began to etch themselves into the frost as though written by invisible fingers. Help me. My breath caught. More letters followed. So cold. The girl, the real one, still hadn't moved. But I could feel her eyes on me now, boring into my profile like icicles piercing through skin. I focused on my paperwork with desperation, the numbers swimming before my eyes. The cooler lights flickered. In the reflection, the girl's image pressed harder against the glass. Her mouth still wide open in that silent cry, her fingers leaving trails in the frost as she spelled out another word. Please. The scent of old snow and something sweeter, something rotten, filled the air, like wilted flowers left too long in a sealed room. Then I saw it, her shadow. It shouldn't have been possible. It wasn't cast by the girl. It moved independently, stretching across the back wall like oil spilled across a surface. The shadow was too tall, its limbs too long. Its fingers ended in jagged points that reached toward me with agonizing slowness. One hand pressed against the wall above the register, another curved upward, brushing the ceiling tiles. I gripped the inventory sheet so tightly it crinkled in my fist. The room was ice cold now, so cold my coffee cup had begun to frost over, its liquid freezing at the rim. Still I didn't look up. Still I didn't speak. I just kept writing. Useless inventory numbers, empty data, an act of defiance against fear, and then suddenly it stopped. The temperature stabilized. The frost melted from the cooler door. The reflection of the girl vanished, leaving only shelves of soda and sports drinks behind. The rot in the air faded. The unnatural weight lifted. I glanced up. She was gone. No sound, no farewell, no bell. Over the door, just gone, like mist evaporating under sunlight. The only evidence she'd been there at all were the faint smudges on the cooler door, small handprints barely visible in the remaining condensation, and the words still fading in, the melting frost. Thank you. I stood motionless for a full minute, then shakily reached for the logbook. 31:2:57 a.m. Child entered alone, followed Rule 3. No engagement, extreme temperature drop. Frost formed on cooler glass. Messages appeared. Help me. So. Cold Gamuya, please. Shadow behaved independently. No eye contact. Child disappeared without incident. Message thank you left behind. I closed the book and leaned back against the counter, letting the tension flood out of me in one long, trembling exhale. It was only 3 a.m., 3 hours to go, and already I felt like I'd survived a lifetime. At tea. Exactly 3 a.m. Something shifted. It wasn't a sound, not a movement. More like a sensation, like the entire building exhaled a long-held breath. The floor felt a degree warmer, the air more pressurized. I stood frozen behind the counter, logbook still open, pen in hand. The pages didn't flutter, but I could feel a subtle static in the air, the kind you get before lightning strikes or a power surge fries everything in sight. I checked the rules again, not because I didn't remember them, but because I wanted to be absolutely certain. Rule 4. Never answer the store phone between 3:17 a.m. and 3:23 a.m., no matter how many times it rings. The specificity of those 6 minutes haunted me. I'd seen the patterns in the logbook. Calls at strange hours, always with the same description. Wet breathing, distorted voices, wrong sounds, and worse, in some entries, silence followed the ringing. Not because the line had gone dead, but because the employee who'd answered never wrote again. I stepped into the office, pulled the chair back slightly, and sat in front of the old rotary phone. It looked so ordinary sitting there. Beige, cracked plastic, with the cord slightly frayed near the base. It could have come from any thrift store in America, but I knew somehow that it wasn't just a phone. It was a conduit. 4 a.m., still safe. Barely. The cooler in the next room kicked into a new gear, its compressor whining, then settling into a low, throbbing hum. The pitch began to fluctuate in intervals, low, high, low, like a breath pattern. I tried to ignore it, tried to convince myself it was just a faulty motor reacting to the temperature change from the previous incident. But then the fluorescent lights began to flicker in unison, not erratically but rhythmically. 3 short blinks, then pause. 3 more blinks. SOS. My spine locked into place. The cash register glitched. The display screen blinked rapidly through numbers, thousands, then negatives, then impossible dates. 4/12/2089, a 9999999999. The drawer opened and closed by itself once, as if testing its range. And then the coffee maker let out a gurgle. Not from heat or pressure, but something deeper. A sound, like a groan from the back of a throat that hadn't tasted air in years. 14 a.m. 3 minutes. I braced myself. My fingers hovered near the phone, not to pick it up, but to resist the urge. I needed to be near it to listen. I needed to know what it would say, even if I couldn't speak back. At 3:15 a.m. it rang. The sound pierced the air like a razor blade, high, shrill, and too sharp. I flinched, my hand jerking instinctively before I caught myself. 1 ring, then silence. It rang again, twice this time, then silence. 3rd ring. I closed my eyes. 4th. I opened them again and stared at the phone. 5th ring. Then, like a lull in a storm, the phone stopped. The silence that followed wasn't real silence. The air was full of sound, inaudible but present. It felt like a pressure in my ears, like being underwater just before surfacing. I stared at the wall clock. 3:16 a.m. Then came the 6th ring. It sliced through the static like a scream through fog. I didn't pick it up, but it didn't matter. The line connected anyway. I stared in horror as the receiver slowly lifted off the cradle without my touch. The phone hissed, crackled, then cleared, and then I heard my voice. "My name is Jake Morrison. I'm the night clerk at Midnight Express Gas." My voice, but breathless, strained, and terrified. "I can't get out," it said. "I don't know what's real anymore. I thought if I followed the rules I'd be safe, but it's a trick. It keeps us here. It keeps us repeating." The voice choked. There was a sound like crying, but it was too broken, too mechanical, like someone trying to simulate human sobs. It's cold. I've been here so long. Time loops, I think. I hear the phone even when it isn't ringing. I see myself behind the counter. I don't remember what it's like outside. Please. If anyone hears this, help me. The background noise on the line matched perfectly with my surroundings. The cooler hum, the register's static blinks, even the exact flicker rhythm of the overhead lights. It wasn't a recording. It was real time. A broadcast. A mirror. Then, the voice changed. It sounded more lucid now, more resigned. I know you're listening. I know you're sitting right where I am now. You feel like you're still Jake Morrison, but you're not. Not anymore. This place remakes us. I felt bile rise in my throat. I stumbled back a step. The receiver dangled in the air, swaying. Slightly. You'll see soon, it whispered. The longer you stay, the more you forget, and when you finally break one rule, even by accident, it claims you. Then you become the voice on the line. A low distortion drowned out the rest of the words. The voice looped, breaking up mid-sentence, repeating phrases like a corrupted file. Please, can't remember, too cold. Jake, 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 help. The phone rang again, still off the hook. 17 a.m. The true danger window had begun. Everything changed. The lights exploded, literal sparks bursting from the ceiling as glass rained down onto the linoleum. The cooler shrieked and seized into silence. Every reflective surface began to frost over in seconds, the windows turning opaque with ice that spread like veins. The phone continued to ring. Ring. A high-pitched wail came from somewhere inside the walls, like metal being torn apart from the inside. Ring, the cash register began to bleed. No, not metaphorically. Liquid, thick and dark, seeped out from the seams and down the counter like oil. The smell hit me immediately. Burnt plastic, copper, and something wrong, like scorched hair and wet meat. Ring. I dropped to my knees, crawling. Toward the office, heart pounding so loud I couldn't hear myself think. The shadows moved now, literally pulled themselves off the walls. Tendrils. Reaching. Ring. The receiver twitched on its own. The numbers on the wall clock began to spiral, then stopped abruptly at 3:20. The ringing hit a new frequency. No longer a sound, but a sensation. I could feel it in my teeth, my bones vibrating in the fluid behind my eyes. Voices whispered from behind every wall. You know us. You called once. Now we're answering. I squeezed my eyes shut. 21. The air pressure collapsed. My nose began to bleed. The frost crept along the floor tiles like a sentient tide. The ringing became mechanical laughter. Just pick up, Jake. The voice was mine again, begging now. I'll be quick. Just a minute. Just let me out. I'm so tired of being in here. 22. 1 minute left. I crawled into the office and slammed the steel door. The sound cut off instantly, the ringing, the voices. All of it. Gone. I sat in the darkness, the only light coming from the tiny red glow of the backup power indicator above the desk. The silence was absolute. 23. The temperature rose. The lights flickered back to life. The pressure equalized. It was over. The phone in the office sat still on its cradle. I reached for the logbook and forced my numb hand to write 3:23 a.m. Phone rang. Did not answer during danger window. Receiver lifted on its own. Heard my own voice. Claimed to be trapped. Environment destabilized. Lights exploded, frost-covered surfaces. Fluid leaked from register. Shadows moved independently. Sealed self in office. All returned to normal at 3:23. And beneath that, in shaking block letters, if you hear yourself, do. Not listen. I leaned back, heart still hammering. My ears rang with phantom echoes. I had survived the rule's darkest window, but I was starting to understand something far worse. This place didn't just want you to break the rules. It wanted to become you. By 4 a.m., I was a threadbare version of myself. My nerves frayed, my thoughts scattered like ashes in wind. Time had slowed to a crawl, not because of boredom, but because of constant tension, like living in a minefield where every tick of the clock might trigger the next horror. But when I looked up from the register at 4:01 a.m., something new arrived that was worse in its calmness. Headlights. They cut through the darkness with surgical precision, too bright, too cold, like halogen eyes in the night. The truck rolled into the parking lot, a big rig 18-wheeler style, engine purring low like a beast trying not to growl. I watched it pull in slow and smooth, headlights perfectly aligned with the store's entrance. The vehicle hissed as it came to a stop, and then nothing. The engine stayed on, but no one got out. I waited 1 minute, 2. No door opened, no figure emerged, no movement inside the cab, just the engine humming like a mechanical lullaby. I turned back to the rule sheet, scanning for anything relevant. There was nothing directly about vehicles, but something in the logbook had mentioned a silent delivery once. A note scribbled in frantic pen: truck arrived at 4 a.m., no driver. Do not interact. Watch for inconsistencies. I peered out, the glass again, tension winding tighter. The truck still idled, no exhaust. That was the first inconsistency. In the freezing Alaskan air there should have been visible vapor, thick curling smoke from the tailpipe. But there was none. The air behind the rig shimmered instead, like heat rising from asphalt in the desert. I stepped back from the window, and that's when I saw him. Carl, or something wearing Carl's skin. He walked around the side of the building, emerging from the same direction as the rig. Same Carhartt jacket, same heavy boots, same slow, methodical gait. But the moment I saw his face, I knew the proportions were wrong. Too symmetrical, too clean. Carl was grizzled, worn in like a leather wallet. This version had skin like molded wax, no pores, no stubble, no real weight behind his expression. His eyes met mine through the window and held. I didn't wave, he did. A perfect wave, robotic, like someone who had read about waving but never done it with a soul. He opened the door and stepped inside. I could barely breathe. Morning, he said, his voice near identical to Carl's, but the inflection was just slightly off. The cadence was missing the pauses. Carl talked like a man who'd seen things and chewed on every word. This one spoke like he was reading from a script. You're early, I said, trying to steady my tone. Routine check-in, he replied, smoothly. New protocol. Gas deliveries now occur during shift to ensure coverage. Didn't Carl tell you that? I stared at him. You are Carl. A pause. He blinked. Too slow. Of course I am, he said. I gripped the underside of the counter to stop my hands from shaking. I think I should call the real Carl, I said, just to confirm. His smile froze. You don't need to do that. Actually, I think I do. I stepped toward the office. That's when he moved. Not fast, sudden, no transitional motion, just there 1 second and 10 feet closer the next. Like frames had been skipped in a broken film. You're breaking protocol, he said, smile gone. You're not following Rule 7. I hadn't read a Rule 7. Not on the sheet Carl gave me. What Rule 7? I asked, voice low. He didn't answer. Instead, he said, Gasoline, it's leaking. That made my blood go cold. He gestured out the window toward the truck. There's a spill. If it reaches the generator behind the station, the fire will... So it's unfortunate I didn't move, didn't turn. You should go check, he continued. Right now, I'll handle the counter. I remembered Carl's actual words from earlier in the night. You don't let anyone behind the counter, ever. And I knew this thing wasn't just pretending to be Carl. It was trying to replace him. Replace me. Thanks, I said. But I'll call corporate. We'll get emergency maintenance on the line. Jake, he said, and now the voice changed. lower, older, heavier, not Carl's at all. I wouldn't do that. His shape began to shift, not melting, but reforming. Shoulders broadened, hairline receded, eyes went dark like glass marbles, and his smile split too wide, far past what the muscles in a human face should allow. "I'm here to relieve you," he rasped. "Aren't you tired?" I backed into the office, locked the door, and grabbed the emergency comm panel Carl showed. Me earlier. I pressed the red button, static, then a voice. "You saw him, didn't you?" It was Carl, the real one. "Yes," I whispered. "He's here." "Good," Carl said. "Then you're ready for Rule 8. "There is no Rule 8. "On the sheet." "No," Carl said, "but if you survive long enough, you earn it." I heard the doorknob jiggle. "Tell me," I said quickly. "What's Rule 8? "Rule 8, Carl said calmly, "is this. If something comes to relieve you before dawn, it isn't here to help. It's here to inherit. And if it makes it behind the counter, it becomes you forever." The doorknob stopped moving. Silence. Then a heavy thud against the office door. Once, twice. No yelling, no threats. Just wait. Like it was leaning on the door, waiting. Then nothing. I stayed in the office another 10 minutes, heart beating so loud I thought it might shake the walls. When I emerged again, the rig was gone. No tire tracks, no spilled gas, no fake Carl, only the register light blinking. 4:29 a.m. I logged the event in the book. Every word, every gesture, every lie. And beneath it, I added one more rule. Rule 8. If anyone comes to relieve you before dawn, never let them behind the counter. They are not here for you. They are here to become you. It was nearly 4:45 a.m. when I noticed the figure standing by the payphone outside. No headlights had approached, no footsteps in the snow. 1 second the space had been empty, and the next he was just there. He stood motionless beneath the flickering street lamp, wrapped in a faded grey parka, hood drawn low over his face. Not moving, not cold, just waiting. I froze behind the counter, unsure whether to acknowledge him. I checked the rules again. Nothing about payphones, nothing about people standing just outside the perimeter. The logbook had a few vague entries, mentions, of ghosts of previous shifts and false reflections. One scribbled margin note from someone named Elliot read, "If you see someone watching from the phone booth, do not engage, but if they speak, you must listen." At 4:48 a.m., he moved. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his hand and lifted the receiver. From the payphone cradle. He didn't dial, he didn't insert coins, he just held the receiver to his ear. And then the store phone rang, not the office one. The public-facing one behind the counter. I felt the blood drain from my face. It rang once, twice, 3 times. I picked it up on the 4th. "Hello?" His voice came through, low and frayed like an old cassette tape left out in the sun. "You're Anu," he said. I said nothing. "You followed the rules," he continued. "Mostly, that's good. You've lasted longer than most. I was like you once." His voice cracked as if he hadn't used it in years. "I worked here in 1998. Thought it was just a job. Thought the rules were weird but harmless. Then one night I slipped, just once. Looked at something I shouldn't have. Talked to someone who wasn't real." His tone dropped to a whisper. "And now I can't leave." I pressed the phone tighter against my ear. "What do you mean?" I asked, heart thudding. "I mean I'm still here," he said. "Not in your time, maybe, but in some version of the Midnight Express. Every shift blends together. Every hour loops. You think it's Tuesday. I've had Wednesday stuck in repeat for 6 years." "That's not possible," I murmured. "You'll see," he replied. "This place isn't just haunted. It's a trap, a loop, a pocket outside time. Every version of the station exists, all at once. The gas pumps, the freezer, the inventory, identical across realities. And every reality has its own set of victims." He went silent for a beat. They don't want workers. They want reflections, copies, substitutes. That's what the replacements are, facsimiles. Eventually, if you break enough rules, they replace you with one. And your version, trapped. Just like me. I felt my knees weaken. There has to be a way out, I said. Carl said, Carl, the voice said, suddenly amused. Which one? I swallowed. How do I escape? You don't, he said flatly. Not unless you do what they fear most. And what's that? Remember, he said. Silence crackled on the line. If you can hold on to your memories, your name, your past, yourself, they can't overwrite you. They can trap your body but not your mind. That's why the rules exist. They aren't for safety. They're tests, challenges, filters. My hand trembled. How long do I have? Until dawn, he said. Maybe, if you're lucky. But even if you leave, part of you may still stay. This place has a way of echoing. He paused, voice becoming distant. Don't forget who you are. Then he hung up. I looked out the window. The booth was empty. No footprints in the snow. No lingering. Mist. Just vacant air and a payphone swaying gently on its cord. I sat back, gripping the counter as the overhead lights flickered again. The shadows on the floor twisted for a moment, then returned to normal, trapped realities, reflections, substitutions. I reached for the logbook, turned to the back cover, and began writing in capital letters. Remember, my name is Jake Morrison. I am 27 years old. I took this job for money, not purpose. I was born in Boise. I had a sister named Molly. I am real. I underlined it 3 times. Then I closed the logbook and whispered to myself, they can't take me if... I remember who I am. It was 5:12 a.m. when the gas station began to smell like burning flesh. At first it was subtle, like overcooked bacon from the diner across the highway. But within minutes, the air inside Midnight Express thickened, oily and metallic. I stepped outside, drawn by instinct more than reason. The sky had begun to lighten, the faintest bruising of pink and ash on the edge of the horizon. And standing at the far edge of the lot, where the concrete met frozen gravel, was a figure. At first glance, I thought it was just a man in heavy gear, possibly a miner or someone passing through on a night shift. But then he moved and I saw the flames. They weren't consuming him in the normal sense. They were embedded in him. His skin bubbled and split, but didn't burn away. His eyes glowed like open furnaces, and each breath came out as a wheeze of smoke and ash. He walked slowly, his boots leaving melted impressions in the frost-bitten ground. He didn't speak, didn't look at me, just headed toward the gas pumps. I was too stunned to move, but something deep in my bones screamed, he doesn't want gas. He's looking for the well. I darted back inside, heart racing, and yanked open the logbook. I flipped to the oldest, most faded pages near the back, smudged writing, almost unreadable, but I found the phrase I'd been hoping was just a ghost story. If you see the burning man, lock the doors and stay low. He's looking for the entrance. He's looking for the place where it all began. I bolted the doors, dropped to my knees behind the counter and peeked out. The burning man stood still now. He turned toward the building, not directly at me, but as if sensing the presence of memory, of knowledge. Then, slowly, he knelt, and with blistered, blackened hands he began scraping at the asphalt. It took me a few seconds to realize what he was doing. He was drawing a spiral, a symbol scorched into the parking lot. Around it he carved out words, not English, but old primal glyphs that radiated dread, even if I couldn't read them. And then somehow I heard a voice, not from his mouth, but in my head, low, rumbling, and old. The mine is still open. The mouths still hunger. The pact is not fulfilled. I stumbled back, crashing into a display of windshield wiper fluid. My thoughts raced. Mine. What mine? Was this just metaphor? Some horror trope baked into the station's legend? Then I remembered. The map Carl had once shown me in passing. A dusty old sheet pinned behind the supply closet door, showing local sites and hazards. And there it was. Kowalski Ridge, abandoned mining camp Est, 1913, collapsed, 1938, sealed by order of state authority. Carl had muttered something about it once, calling it the real reason Midnight Express was built here. I thought he meant infrastructure or fuel logistics, but now I understood this wasn't just a gas station. It was a capstone, a lid, a seal, and the burning man. He wasn't a ghost. He was a warning. I flipped through the logbook again, deeper, farther back. Taped inside the final cover was a yellowing page, a scanned excerpt from an article dated 1947. Authorities report 17 bodies recovered from the Kowalski Ridge collapse, but survivors dispute the number. Workers reported strange chanting from deep shafts. Many believed the cave-in was not due to structural failure, but sabotage. Survivors spoke of a hunger beneath the rock and fire that walks in human shape. No official comment has been made about these claims. Below that, handwritten in red ink, do not approach the burning man. Do not follow him. He knows the way back in. The lights flickered. Outside, the burning man stood now at the base of the pump nearest to the store. He raised one arm and pointed, not at me, but toward the forest behind the station, toward the black trees where the fog never fully receded, and then he turned and walked into the woods, leaving a scorched trail behind him. For reasons I couldn't explain, reasons I didn't want to face, I followed. I grabbed the emergency flashlight, left the door unlocked, I would regret that later, and followed the path of smoldering footprints through the tree line. The cold bit hard, but the closer I got to the trail, the warmer it became. The forest opened like a mouth, and I found it, a shaft entrance carved into the earth, hidden beneath decades of moss and roots and snow. But his fire had revealed it, melted everything away to show the rusted steel frame and the half-rotted sign that read, Kowalski Ridge Mine, Number 3, Entry Forbidden. The burning man stood at the threshold, staring into the dark tunnel, and for a moment I could see through time. He wasn't a monster. He was a miner, a man named Elias Vaughn, face covered in soot, eyes full of terror. He had burned to death down there, trying to seal the tunnel from the inside. The fire didn't kill him. The pact bound him. I saw it in a flash, chains of molten light wrapping around him as something vast and unseen crawled up the shaft behind him. And I heard the words again, but this time in his voice. They made a deal. Flesh for fire. Workers for safety. The mine fed them, the gas station kept the door shut, but the door is thinning. The air crackled, and Elias looked at me, truly looked at me, for the first time. Midnight Express is failing, he rasped, mouth unmoving. They used you, all of us, to guard the seal, but it's weakening. What can I do? I asked. I'm just a guy working a night shift. No, he said, taking a step toward me. You're the last one who remembers, and the last to survive the entire shift. What happens at dawn? He looked up at the lightening sky, and for a moment his flames dimmed. They'll try to take your mind, erase the shift, make it like it never happened. But if you remember, if you keep remembering, you break the cycle. You anchor the truth, you expose them. His body began to fade, embers rising off him like dust. One more rule, he whispered, as the forest wind began to rise. What is it? He turned, face glowing like coals in the dark. Rule 9, at sunrise everything lies, trust nothing, not even yourself. Then he stepped into the mine, and the tunnel sealed shut behind him. No sound, no quake. Just a long exhale from the earth itself. I stood there for a full minute, shaking, my boots sinking into damp ash and old snow. Then I turned and ran back toward the gas station. I had just under an hour left, and whatever was coming, it wasn't going to wait. When I stepped back into Midnight Express at 5:32 a.m., something was wrong. Subtly, impossibly wrong. The air felt thicker, as though the walls had been coated in oil or sweat. The overhead lights still flickered, but the color had shifted. Less fluorescent white, more of a sickly green tinge, casting everything in shades of decay. The hum of the cooler was still present, but lower now, slower, like it was breathing instead of running. And the smell. Rotting insulation, wet pennies, burnt hair. I reached the counter and found the logbook still there, but the writing inside was no longer mine, or rather, it was, but warped. Familiar sentences twisted into shapes I never wrote. 5:57 a.m. The girl remembered. Too much. Eyes watching from the inside. Thank you for your offering. A.m. Carl's skin doesn't fit anymore. Next time, make sure the smile stays on. I flipped faster, heart pounding. Pages I knew had been blank were now filled with erratic handwriting. Maps, diagrams, symbols drawn in ash-colored ink. A looping sentence repeated 6 times on the final page. You were never alone, you were never alone, you were never alone. I backed away. The station shifted. It started with the windows. There were too many of them. Where before there had been 2 large panes flanking the front door, there were now 4, stretching all the way to the ceiling. But when I looked outside, the view no longer showed the parking lot. It showed the interior of the store. 4 perfect windows, reflecting 4 perfect versions of Midnight Express, and each one delayed, like security feeds out of sync. I watched myself walk across the store in one pane, a full 3 seconds after I had done so in real life. In another pane, I was still standing behind the counter, smiling. I wasn't smiling. I blinked. The other me didn't. That version stared at the camera, at me, with a wide, unbroken grin. Then it began to wave. My skin crawled. I turned away from the windows and nearly tripped over a display rack that hadn't been there moments before. A tower of beef jerky and motor oil balanced perfectly in a spiral. Too tall, too stable, too intentional. Something was rearranging the station in real time. I ran to the freezer aisle. Where I expected to see the rows of glass doors was now a mirror, floor to ceiling. Not a display, not frosted glass, just a full polished mirror reflecting a store that looked identical, yet wrong. In the reflection, I saw myself, but I was standing still, arms down, face slack. Behind me in the mirrored aisle stood a figure, tall, pale, no face, only a smear where features should be, like wet paint dragged down a canvas. I turned around. Nothing. The aisle behind me was empty. But in the mirror, he was closer. I stepped back. So did the reflection, but the figure didn't. It moved forward, smooth, silent, no footfalls, no shadows. It raised one hand and pressed it against the inside of the mirror, where frost bloomed around its fingers. Then it opened its mouth. No sound came out, but I could feel the vibration in my skull, like a subsonic frequency meant for something deeper than ears. I stumbled back into the main aisle. Every display had shifted again. Now the snacks were gone, replaced by rows of photographs, all Polaroid style. Each one showing a different person standing behind the counter of Midnight Express. Men, women, teenagers, all wearing the same uniform shirt, some smiling, some crying, all watching. A fresh photo lay on the floor in front of me. I picked it up. With shaking hands, it was me, taken just moments ago. But behind me in the photo stood a tall, pale figure with no face. I dropped it. The floor vibrated beneath my feet, not from footsteps, but like the entire station had breathed in. The ceiling. Tiles began to ripple like water. Shelves twisted subtly, stretching too tall, too narrow, bending into curves that should have made them collapse. The microwave on the counter turned itself on, humming steadily with no item inside. The slushy machine began to bleed. Bright red. Liquid oozed from its seams and pooled on the floor, sticky and thick, smelling faintly of copper and rot. I backed toward the restroom door, heart hammering. Then I heard it. The door chime. Ding ding. Someone or something had entered. But when I turned, there was no one near the entrance. Instead, the entire front wall was gone, not broken, not shattered, just missing. The station now opened directly into void, a vast black plain with no stars, no wind, no ground, just a flat nothingness that stretched in all directions. In the middle of it, one familiar thing stood, the gas pump, only one. And beside, it, the burning man. He pointed at me again. Behind me, the station warped further. The coffee machine was now a pile of human teeth. The mop bucket had become a writhing sack of something organic, pulsing gently. The clock on the wall ticked backward, and the logbook? It lay open on the counter, pages fluttering despite no wind, ink rearranging itself into a final message. The Pi station is not a place, it's a test, a mouth, a reflection of what you fear most. You lasted the night, but it isn't over. Not until you choose. Choose? I didn't understand. Choose what? Then I saw the door to the stockroom begin to glow, and behind it faintly, sunlight, the real world, or another trick. The burning man raised both hands now, beckoning. The void trembled, the lights buzzed louder, and the walls began to close. Midnight Express was collapsing, not from physical damage, from conclusion, from decision. I had minutes left, and I had to choose. Walk into the sunlight and pray it was real, or step into the void, follow the burning man and uncover the final truth. The sunlight behind the stockroom door was the most beautiful thing I'd seen all night. It wasn't harsh or dramatic. It was soft, golden, like early spring mornings back home in Boise. It didn't flicker. It didn't hum. It just glowed. And yet, something about it felt wrong, too perfect, too easy. I approached slowly, the ground beneath my feet groaning, not creaking but groaning like flesh under strain. Every step toward the light made the rest of the station ripple further into madness. The floor tiles curled, upward, exposing pulsing veins beneath. The coffee machine now whispered in a tongue I couldn't understand. The air was humid with breath that wasn't mine, and then, from the side aisle near the freezer, Carl stepped out. At least that's who it looked like. He wore the same dusty red jacket, the same patched-up jeans. He even held his favorite mug, World's okayest night manager, in one hand. He smiled like he always did, that tired, warm grin. But the eyes weren't Carl's. They were too still, too reflective, like black mirrors that swallowed all expression. "Morning, champ," he said, voice perfectly Carl's. "You made it, so I knew you had it in you." I took a cautious step back. "Where's the real Carl?" "You're looking at him," he replied with an easy shrug. "Shift's almost over. Just head through that door, clock out and all this." He gestured to the warped gas station. Gone, like a bad dream. I glanced back at the door. That warm light was still there, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. "And if I don't?" Carl's smile didn't waver. "Then you stay. You become part of the place, like me, like the others. Trust me, you don't want that." He stepped forward, slowly. "I remember you," I said. "You told me about Rule 7. You said, don't ever open the storage closet. But you didn't write that in the logbook." "Slip of memory," he replied smoothly. "It's been a long time, but hey," I cut him off. "You also never asked my name." that made him stop. Carl, real Carl, had always asked. Fake. Carl blinked once, then again. His smile faltered. That's what this is, isn't it? I said, backing toward the register. A final test, one last trick. He sighed, and when he looked up again, the mask cracked. His mouth stayed still, but another smile stretched across his cheeks. Too wide, too slow, like a zipper opening a long bone. His neck bent at an unnatural angle, head tilting sideways until his ear nearly touched his shoulder. The mug in his hand liquefied, running down his wrist like ink. His voice grew lower, layered, like a dozen versions of Carl speaking at once. You can leave, Jake. All you have to do is forget. I shook my head. That's the price, isn't it? The light through that door. If I go through it, I forget everything. The shift, the rules, the truth. He took another step forward. And if I remember, I stay. Yes, the thing hissed. You remember, and you stay. You become another guard, another Carl, another shadow. But I break the cycle. He paused, and then he smiled, truly smiled. That's why we're afraid of you. Behind me, the stockroom door cracked wider. I could see a sunny street now, a car idling, a fast food bag in the passenger seat. My car, my job waiting, my life, fake. Carl raised his hand. Choose comfort, Jake, choose forgetting, or stay here and rot. I looked at the logbook, still on the counter. My final entry was already being written. 56 a.m. Final confrontation. Offer to forget. Door of light. Escape with amnesia. Station wants silence. Truth is poison. To them, memory is a weapon. I grabbed the pen and I wrote 4 words beneath it. I choose to remember. The walls screamed. Every shelf collapsed. The aisles twisted in on themselves. The ceiling cracked open like an egg, revealing a swirling void above. Fake Carl lunged, but too slow. I shoved the logbook under the counter and sprinted toward the employee hallway. Behind me, the store collapsed inward piece by piece, not crumbling but erasing, like it had never existed. The only thing that remained was the logbook anchored by my words. I reached the hallway and found a second door. Not sunlight, not darkness, but something in between. A steel door marked Truth, carved in etched letters scorched into the surface. Behind me, Carl screamed in a dozen voices at once, but I opened the door and stepped through. The steel door slammed shut behind me with a sound that didn't echo. It ended, like a full stop in reality itself. I stood in silence, chest heaving, surrounded by complete darkness. No fluorescent lights, no whispering walls, just black, thick and endless. But then ahead I saw it. Not light, not exactly. A grayness, the color of memory half faded, of things glimpsed in dreams just before waking. It poured in slowly, illuminating a narrow corridor lined with mirrors. Hundreds of them. Each one reflected not just my face, but versions of it. Me in 1,000 different moments, 1,000 different outcomes. Some were twisted, burned, hollow-eyed. Others stood behind the counter at Midnight Express, smiling in uniforms like Carl's. And then, at the very end of the hall, one final mirror. Clear, untouched, and behind it, sunlight. Real sunlight. Not the dreamlike warmth from the fake stockroom. This was the dry, golden blaze of Alaska morning, sharp, cold, and unflinching. I pressed forward. Each step I took down the corridor, a voice whispered in my ear. Not malevolent, not kind, just observant. You remembered your name. You passed the burning man. You rejected the false Carl. You resisted the lie of the light. They weren't questions, they were affirmations, observations from whatever ran the test, from whatever the station truly was. When I reached the final mirror, it didn't reflect me at all. It reflected the gas station, the true one, not distorted, not monstrous, just still, empty, the pumps idle, the lights inside off, the snow outside untouched, as if the place had been closed for years. Then a crack formed down the mirrors. "Center," and the voice spoke one last time. "You are no longer the night clerk. You are the witness." The mirror shattered outward. I stumbled through and I was standing in a field, a real open snow-covered field just outside Copper Center. The gas station was gone. No building, no sign, no pumps. Just the long gravel road, untouched, leading back toward the highway. The sun was rising over the spruce trees. Birds sang, and in the distance a truck engine roared to life, a ranger vehicle. The man behind the wheel spotted me and hit the brakes hard. He jumped out, rushing toward me with wide eyes. "Jesus, kid, we've been looking for you for a week." I stared at him, lips cracked, throat dry. "A week?" He nodded. "You were supposed to start at the station off Route 4, right? They found your car abandoned at the turnout. No footprints, no signs, just gone." I looked back over my shoulder. Nothing there, just pine trees. The ranger ushered me into the truck, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. I didn't protest. But as we drove off, I saw something in the side mirror. Not the gas station, just a reflection of it, for half a second, clear as day, then gone. The ranger talked the whole way about reports, radio calls, how no one had used that gas station in over 15 years, but I barely heard him. My thoughts spun with everything I'd seen. When we reached the town clinic, I was swarmed. Questions, paperwork, a doctor shining a light in my eyes. They ran blood work, asked about drugs, exposure, mental health. I answered only what I needed. So I told them I got lost hiking, that I hit my head, that I hallucinated. They didn't believe me, but they also didn't press. A week later, I caught a bus south. No job, no luggage, just the logbook. I don't remember grabbing it, but there it was in my duffel, worn, cracked, and now blank. Every page empty except the last, which still bore the words I had written. I choose to remember, and I do. Every night. Every time I close my eyes, I hear the humming of the cooler, the chime of the door, the screech of the slushy machine, coughing up blood. I remember Carl's tired smile. I remember the burning man and the mine. I remember the truth, because someone has to. I still don't know what Midnight Express was. A test? A trap? A gate between realities? Maybe all of them. Maybe something worse. But I know this. It wants to be forgotten. It thrives on forgetting. And that's why I wrote this down, because maybe one day someone else will hear the same job offer, see the same rules, step into the same gas station. And when they do, I hope, they'll find this, remember the rules, break the cycle. Don't let them erase you, and whatever you do, don't trust the morning light. 6 months had passed since I walked out of Midnight Express. I had moved across the country, taken a different name, and tried to live like a normal person. I worked at a coffee shop. I volunteered at a local shelter. I tried to forget. But memory is a stubborn thing, especially when it doesn't want to be forgotten. At night, I would still wake up in a cold sweat, expecting the door chime to ring or the cooler to start humming again. I kept the logbook locked in a metal case under my bed, and sometimes I'd swear I heard it breathing. Still, I convinced myself it was over, that I'd survived something one of a kind, that the nightmare was sealed. Until one ordinary Tuesday afternoon, I got a message from a friend, an old co-worker who knew I'd once been looking for remote jobs. "Hey man, this popped up in a forum I follow. You used to want Alaska gigs, right? This one's wild, LOL." I opened the link. It led to a job board, low budget, minimal design, no company name. Just a single post. Night clerk wanted. Urgent opening location, Copper Center, AK position, overnight attendant. Pay 50 IDHR hours, midnight to 6 a.m. Benefits: none requirements. Ability to follow strict rules and remain calm under pressure. Additional notes: training logbook provided on site. No prior experience necessary. I stared at the listing. The same format, the same town, the same wage. There was even a small image attached. An old gas station bathed in moonlight. No signage, no branding. Just a faint hand-painted number on the window. 247 Midnight Express. It was back. No, it had never left. I sat there, fingers hovering over the keyboard, heart sinking. Then I scrolled down and saw something that made my blood freeze. Number of applicants. One, and beneath that JKCHA, application pending. I hadn't submitted anything. I hadn't logged in. But the system said I had. The gas station wasn't done with me. And worse, it had already started looking for the next one. Thank you for venturing into the darkness with us. If these stories sent chills down your spine, don't keep the fear to yourself. Leave a comment, smash that like button, and share this video with someone who dares to listen in the dark. We release terrifying true stories every week, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what's lurking in the shadows. This is High Scare Stories, where nightmares don't end when the video does. Until next time, stay safe and stay scared.